Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Wixson, and right there, Member of Parliament, James Maloney, for, of course, the area that I'm broadcasting from and connecting to Ottawa, Etobicoke Lakeshore. Thanks so much for joining us, James. How have you been?
I'm great, Mike. Listen, thanks very much for doing this. It's glad to connect and have a chat about everything that's going on. Personally, I'm doing fantastic, and I'm back in Ottawa right now. Actually, I'm coming to you live from just outside of the House of Commons. I'm in.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I'm in West Block. If you go about 20 feet that way, you can listen to people debating in the chamber where I'll be as soon as we're finished chatting now. So, things are going well.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thanks for taking the time from Ottawa to do that. It's nice to actually make that connection and see what it's like for you there. And in fact, later on in the podcast, I thought maybe we would get a little bit of an education from you about the goings on Parliament Hill.
Yeah. For sure.
So listen, out of the gate, it's been about a year since we last chatted, and we're just out of summer. How was your summer? What did you get up to?
My summer was great. I mean, it was busy. I mean, the house rises for July and August. Um, so I got back to the riding, and it's great because what people don't necessarily understand is sort of there's two different components to my job. There's the Ottawa side, and then there's the constituency side. And the constituency side is very, very important, and it's a great opportunity to spend the time in my office in Etobicoke Lakeshore, meeting with community groups or individuals or businesses, and just getting out in the community and getting a chance to catch up and sort of make sure that I've still got a firm grip on everything that's going on. But it was a busy summer. In addition to doing that, I went to Washington with the Prime Minister for part of the NATO meetings in early July. We had some interesting meetings with different politicians there, including Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell. And then in early August, I attended a conference on behalf of Parliament in Louisville, Kentucky. It was the National Council of State Legislatures. So there was about 2,000 representatives from different state legislatures from across the U.S. And myself and some of my colleagues attended that on behalf of the Canadian Parliament. And there's representatives from Europe there as well. And then most recently, before I came back, when the House resumed a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to go to Ukraine and see firsthand what's going on there. So it was a very, very busy summer.
Wow, jammed. Indeed. Yeah, it's so funny. I think that we often think of our politicians as always being in Parliament, but really there's a lot to do back home. And just in scheduling this, for example, I see how busy you are. So now I understand why. This is quite a trip, going to the Ukraine. Did you have expectations? What did you find? And what can you tell us about the importance of us being there?
Yeah, look, it's did I have expectations? I did, but it's a strange thing. It was different than I expected, but I didn't really know what to expect necessarily, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does.
I've been very close to the Ukraine issue from the outset. Myself, in fact, our entire government has been, 100% committed to supporting Ukraine in their war efforts. But seeing it is different than talking about it, reading about it, and seeing it on the news. I went with my colleague Yvonne Baker. We attended the YES conference. It's the Yalta European Strategy Conference. It's been going on for about 20 years now. Since the most recent invasion of Ukraine, it's essentially sort of turned into a wartime panel discussion. There was about 200 people there. It was mostly political and business leaders, mostly political leaders from Europe. There was presidents and prime ministers and diplomats. Only the two of us from Canada. But it's an opportunity to see firsthand what's going on. Now, we're in Kyiv, so we're not on the front lines. But Kyiv, it's people say, what's it like? I said, it's really a tale of two cities, because on the one hand, you have this magnificent, beautiful city. And, during the day, people are trying to go about their daily lives. They're trying to go to work. Children are going to school. You'll see people on the streets going for lunch, and then 3 hours later there'll be an air raid siren, and the building down the street could be getting shelled. And that's just the fact of the matter and the way they live right now. So it's a testament to the resilience of the Ukrainian people, because they are trying to continue leading their lives, and
Yeah.
they're doing it. But it's while I was there, and President Zelensky was there, but some of the Ukrainian MPs took myself and Yvonne out into Kyiv to see some of the damage that was done. And one of the most, in fact, I don't have words strong enough to see it. There's a children's hospital in Kyiv. It's the largest children's hospital in the country. And in July, it was attacked by the Russians and virtually destroyed. And we went to the hospital, and it was Mike. It was I had an emotional reaction that I didn't anticipate, and it was devastating. It's like it would be like walking downtown Toronto. You turn the corner, there's Sick Kids Hospital, and it's been destroyed by missiles. That's the only thing I can compare it to. And
It's very difficult to process that, and I would imagine seeing it would be of heavy impact emotionally. I think that it's become a polarizing issue, where really I think some people just forget about the tragedy associated with it every day.
it's polar. It's becoming polarizing. I guess you're right. I mean, and I don't understand why. I'm going to be blunt. I mean, I can't understand why anybody wouldn't just be 110% committed to supporting Ukraine, because they're fighting for Canada. I mean, the Russians have invaded Ukraine. People forget we border in the north. The Russians are our neighbors. If anybody thinks they're going to stop in Ukraine and not go into Poland or Latvia or any of these other countries, they're mistaken. And so they're fighting for us. And we've had discussions here in Parliament where the opposition isn't at times has been not fully supportive, and I don't understand it for the life of me. I really don't. And what I would encourage everybody who has an opportunity is to go see what I saw. I mean, just getting in and out of the country in itself. I mean, the airspace in Ukraine is closed, so you have to fly to Poland, get to the border, and then take an 11-hour train ride overnight to get to Kyiv. And it's seeing is truly believing. There was a number of panels during the 2 days that I was there at this conference, but probably the most powerful and compelling was a panel of 8 soldiers, different ages, and these aren't military people. These are people like you and I who gave up what they were doing to go fight to defend their country. And every single one of them had a very unique, powerful, compelling story. And it's just the fact that anybody would make this polarizing is beyond my comprehension.
Our support is there. And what did you note that Canada is making a difference doing in the Ukraine right now?
Look, Canada, when we met with government officials, military officials, they're all incredibly grateful for everything Canada is doing. Canada has been there right from the beginning. In fact, before the most recent invasion started 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. Canada is putting both feet forward on a military perspective. We've contributed more financially per capita than any other country. But we can't do it alone. Canada's doing its part, and we will continue to do its part. And people in Ukraine recognize that, and they're very grateful. They're very appreciative of everything Canadians are doing.
You've witnessed some of the challenges in the Ukraine, just in time to come back into your position in Ottawa and here in Etobicoke Lakeshore. What are the challenges you're seeing on the horizon potentially as Parliament is back in session?
Well, look, that's how much time we got. But it's a complicated question. Look, I mean, the world is facing a lot of very difficult circumstances right now. We've talked about Ukraine. We're also seeing what's going on in the Middle East. And all of these things have impact on Canada and the United States and Europe and the rest of the world. In addition to that, there's economically, times are tough. And I recognize that. as I've said to many people many times, it doesn't matter whether you're very wealthy or you're not. You're feeling the difficulty of what's going on right now, and that has an impact on people's emotions and how they're able to conduct their lives and go about their day-to-day business. The important thing for me, and the message I would try to convey to everybody is, remember, we're very fortunate to live in Canada, because in this country we are on a better footing than I believe any other country in the world. And as I said, I've been to Washington, Ukraine, but I've also traveled to other European countries for some meetings, and Canada, relatively speaking, is doing very well. But that's not to say that there isn't a lot of work to do. We're going to get through these tough times together, and I think there's another thing that we've seen. You talked about polarization. Politics has become very polarized in every way, and people ask me why I got into politics in the first place. Is because I believe governments have a role to play in our lives like no other institution. And whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, governments are the most important institution in all of our lives. So we need to make them work. And it's incumbent on everybody who's involved in the process to be responsible, to speak responsibly, and not to get caught up and use rhetoric to try to scare people into believing things that aren't true. We all have an obligation to work together and try to get through difficult times. And I'm sad to see that sometimes that's not always the case. And if you were to ask me my biggest frustration or biggest source of frustration in politics, that would be it. I'm prepared to have a reasonable conversation with anybody, anytime. No party, no government, no individual has a monopoly on good ideas. It's incumbent on us to work together, and we need to see more of that.
I love that approach that you've always seemed to have. I don't care where you're from on your politics. What is the solution? How can we work together? Has always been a consistent theme from the Maloney camp. Okay, so now let me ask you this. Maybe you can straighten this out for me. Like most Canadians, maybe that's not true. Like some Canadians, I don't fully understand what the postings are for ministers. You are, for example, a parliamentary secretary. Are there more of you parliamentary secretaries, and what does that post entail?
It's a great question, and it's a fair question too, I might add, because most people don't know it. I tell people I'm the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, and oftentimes I will get a blank stare, and that's perfectly fair. Look, everybody knows what the Minister of Finance is and what the Minister of Justice and so on and so on. Every minister has a parliamentary secretary, and what the parliamentary secretary is you're sort of a body double for the minister. So or a junior minister. So, for example, the Minister of Justice is unable to attend and answer questions in questions period today. I go in and do it for him. If the Minister of Justice, if there's community groups or organizations that need to be, want to meet with the Minister of Justice, I will take those meetings. I do what he does. You're sort of the stunt man. You step in when he can't do it, or you're a body double. You're there to work with and help the minister. And so there's a parliamentary secretary to every single ministry. But these ministries are very busy. There's a lot of work to be done, and it allows more to get done, and more people have access to the ministry and to the minister. For example, last Monday, in Ontario, we had the official opening of the courts. The courts are already sitting, but every fall they have an official ceremony down at Osgoode Hall at the courthouse, opening the courts, and the Chief Justice of Ontario and the Chief Justice of Superior Court, and the Ontario Court of Justice, and all the judges gather together, and they have a ceremony signifying the official opening of the court. So I attended on behalf of the minister because he wasn't available, so I spoke at that, for example. To give them an update on what the ministry is doing and what the minister is working on, and so on and so forth. And there's a number of examples like that. So it's a role I'm personally very proud to have, because I practiced law for 20 years before I went into politics, Mike. It's a world the legal world, the legal community is near and dear to my heart. It's a community that I've worked with all of my life, and it's very special to me. So I'm honored to do the role. But that's generally what it does. And look, if you go to different countries, I'll use Ireland as an example. They will the parliamentary secretary position. They're called ministers. They're I say junior ministers. They're not called that, but that's how the role is characterized because it helps eliminate the misunderstanding or people aren't aware. I mean, people who are involved in politics know what it is, but everybody else doesn't, nor should they necessarily.
I think it's probably best that we all learn a little bit about what the posts do, because everybody looks at Ottawa and says, who knows what they do? Well,
Yeah.
for example, just right now, a very important role is better covered by two qualified members of parliament than just one, providing more access, more understanding, more eyes on that ministry. Well, thank you so much for straightening that out for me. There may be other questions I have along the way that.
Sorry to interrupt, Mike. There's one other critical role that the parliamentary secretary plays. So every ministry has a committee attached to it. So there's a justice committee. So I'm the eyes and ears of the minister at the committee. So when we have legislation going through the Justice Department, bills amending the criminal code, I'm the one who's sort of responsible for marshaling those through the committee. So which is another big responsibility. So there's a lot of moving parts to it.
It just seems like there's so much to do in your day. It also comes from the right place. I know you are proud to be a Canadian and to serve, and so I think that's where this energy comes from. I hope it continues, and you have a great session today. I understand that question period is up next in your day, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do the podcast, and we'll do this again in shorter order than a year, just keeping people up to date.
I'd love to do it, as much as we can, because it's another way to reach out to the constituents. And look, I've lived in Etobicoke since I was 11 years old. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I get to represent my community. There's only 337 other people in the country who get to do what I do, Mike. And I remind myself every day how privileged I am.
Thank you for joining us for Member of Parliament James Maloney's Etobicoke Lakeshore Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more updates from Parliament Hill and right here at home in Etobicoke Lakeshore.